Hey guys, my goal with this video is to walk you through everything you need to do after you harvest honey to make sure that your hive is ready to survive the summer. Now this will look a little different depending on what part of the country you're in, but if you're a southern beekeeper and you harvest honey, around the 4th of July, your bees have a long, hot summer to survive. If you're further north, you don't have quite as long after you harvest honey, but you still have a lot to do to get your bees ready for winter in a short period of time. So let's say you've harvested your honey. You have, usually you pull the honey supers off, you leave your 2 brood boxes on the hive. You pull all the honey supers above off, you extract the honey, you store those honey supers, using wax malt crystals after you extract the honey out of them. But you still have these 2 boxes left. So within about a week of after I harvest honey, the first thing I'm going to do is go assess my hive. So I'm going to see what I've got. Now this doesn't have to be a long inspection. It's hot outside, so I usually recommend doing an inspection first thing in the morning or in the evening, when it's cooler, for your sake and the bees' sake. You may notice when you go through your hive, especially if it's in the hotter part of the day, like, hey, where's all my bees? When it gets really hot, the bees tend to stay in the lower boxes, or they may be out foraging, but there is often a big difference in how many bees there are in the box, right first thing in the morning or really, really late in the evening versus the heat of the day. I've seen hives that I'm like, oh my goodness, my bees are all gone in the middle of a hot day, and then I go out at 6 a.m. in the morning right at sunup, and it's a box completely full of bees. So, population is kind of a hard thing to judge in the heat. But I'm just gonna really quickly I'm gonna pull some of the center frames out. I'm not really gonna inspect every frame. I wanna get a feel for 2 things. One, I wanna see how much honey they have in their top and bottom boxes, just roughly. And I wanna see how much brood they have and what the brood is looking like. So this hive, I'll show you this frame. It looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it so far. We've got several of these frames up in the top box where you've got, let's see if I can get it to where the sun is shining correctly, but you've got this frame where you've got all this capped honey along this edge. You've got a bunch of capped brood in the middle. There's eggs and larvae all in the center. So this is just kind of a classic healthy frame that I'm excited to see. I mean, again, we've got honey around the edges. We've got brood in the middle. I'm not seeing any warning signs. We've got, and again, I'm doing this inspection in the middle of a hot day. But I've got, this top box is 2/3 full of bees. So we've got a decent bee population even though it's the heat of the day. I've got about 3 frames of brood up in the top box. The queen is still laying. I'm not seeing a tremendous amount of pollen, but I am seeing some. There is still some flowers blooming. You can see around this brood, see if I can get it to where you can see it. All around this brood we've got pollen. So if you see that cap brood in the middle there, if you look around the edge, we've got pollen. So the cap brood is in the center of the frame there, and then you've got the pollen around the edge, and then you've got some capped honey on the lower right side of the frame there. So, we've got some pollen, not a ton, which I wouldn't expect to see a ton of pollen this time of year. The next thing I'm going to do is just kind of hoist up on this box where I'm going to take it off to get a feel for how much honey is in there. And it's totally a guess, but I would say there's about 20 pounds of honey in that box. Bottom box is pretty much completely full of bees, exactly what I want to see. So I've got, roughly 2 boxes full of bees. I'm going to take a quick look down below. I really don't have a lot of honey in the bottom box. These outside frames are pretty empty. They've got, a little bit of honey, but not a lot. And then I've got lots of brood. I've got a lot more brood and a lot less honey. So this is what most of the frames look like in the bottom box. You can see this is just a frame completely full of brood, which is good. It's good, healthy brood. Lots of great cap brood. I'm seeing it on both sides. What I'm not seeing a lot of down here though, is I'm not seeing hardly any honey. So this is a pretty robust, healthy hive with about 20 pounds of honey stored up in the top box, maybe one frame of honey in the bottom box. So they aren't starving, but I can also tell you that they are not going to have enough honey to make it all the way until a fall honey flow. So this hive, I wouldn't want to give this hive or any hive just gallons and gallons of syrup in the middle of the summer, because what that's going to do is it's going to cause them to store all that honey in with all the brood, and the queen's going to run out of areas to lay. So what I do this time of year is I trickle feed. So I take small amounts of syrup and I give them a little bit of syrup every 7 to 10 days, you know, about about a third or so a gallon of syrup every 7 to 10 days. Now, if you live a long way from your bees, just, you know, you can give them, you know, a full gallon of syrup, come back in 2 or 3 weeks, give them another full gallon. That's okay too. But giving them small amounts over a longer period of time encourages that queen to keep laying. It keeps the hive from getting honey bound, and it gives them that trickle to keep their brood rearing up during the summer. Now, again, if you live a long way from your bees, just give them enough to try to maintain 20 to 30 pounds of stores in your second box. And that's really my goal. I don't want them to fill up this second box completely full of honey or syrup. I just want them to stay in that 20 to 30 pound range, which is, you know, 5 or 6 deep frames mostly full of honey or syrup. Once they start dropping really below that for a strong hive like this, they're really going to start shutting down that queen more severely. And it's okay for them to shut down some. We don't need them to be as strong because the honey flows over. But we don't want them to shut down too dramatically, too hard, or the fall is going to get here and they're going to shut down even further, and you might have a hive that dwindles too much over the hot summer and into the fall. So I'm trying to keep my bees kind of stable at this same spot, at this same level throughout the summer. Summer is tough on bees. I mean, it just is. If this was, you know, in the South, I should say. I mean, if you know, my bees that are up in North Dakota right now, I'm not really that worried about them. It's 75 degrees and there's a great pollen flow, you know. So I'm not as worried about them. But in the South, you know, when it's so hot and all the flowers burn up, we have to pay a little more attention to our bees to try to keep them healthy throughout the summer. So, and again, I always tell people, some people say, oh, you don't need to feed your bees. Feeding hurts your bees. You know, you can just pull your honey and leave them be. Well, try it on a couple hives. So take a couple of your hives, harvest the honey, and don't feed. And then take a couple hives and do feed. Run your own little experiment and see how it works. I find that a trickle feed of a hive throughout the summer is going to greatly, greatly benefit them. So this hive, it looks really good. The brood looks good. The next thing I'm going to do is a varroa mite test on them. So the population's good, but I'm going to either use a sticky board that's going to insert underneath the screen. You can put it, if you have a screen bottom board, it can insert underneath the screen here, or it can insert in the front of the hive, right inside the entrance. And I have a whole nother video on how to test for varroa mites using this sticky board. And I will link to that. So if you look in the description of this video, you will see the link to that on YouTube. I'll link to the other video. And if you're watching this on our monthly buzz, I'll send it out in the email follow-up. So you can use this to test varroa mites, or you can use the Varroa Easy Test alcohol wash. And I thought I had one in my truck, and then I just dug through my truck and I apparently didn't have it. But I'll also link to the video on how to do an alcohol wash using the Varroa Easy Check. It's really easy. And so there's 2 different methods you can use to test your hive for varroa mites. That's the next step after my initial assessment. Now, keep in mind, you don't have to test every single hive you have for varroa mites. I usually test, you know, 2 or 3 hives in my apiary, and as long as I'm getting consistent results from those 2 or 3 hives, that's pretty much what all your hives are going to be at. So, you know, if I'm getting 3 mites per 100 bees on every single test in 3 different hives, my whole apiary is pretty much guaranteed to be the same. So you don't have to test every single hive. So test for varroa mites. Most hives need some varroa mite treatment in July or August. I'm going to use this time of year Apivar. So this is Apivar, or I'm going to use Apiguard. So I'm going to use the Apiguard if I have a higher varroa mite infestation. I'm going to use the Apivar if I have a lower varroa mite infestation. So if I have, 4, 5, 6 varroa mites per 100 bees, I'm going to use the Apiguard because it works a little bit faster. If I just have, 2 or 3 varroa mites per 100 bees, I'm going to use the Apivar. It works a little bit slower. So you can kind of pick based on your varroa mite levels. That's why that test is so important. Everyone should test before they treat for varroa mites. I understand that there are some folks that aren't going to test. If you're just dead set against testing, I would probably go with the Apiguard. Assume you have a little bit higher mite population. And it's a little bit more of a natural treatment. But again, at least test with the sticky board. Literally all you have to do is slide it in the entrance of your hive and you're done. Come back in 24 hours and count the varroa mites on the sticky board. Again, watch my video on it, but it's so easy. There's no excuse for not doing at least a sticky board test. It's not as accurate as the alcohol wash, but at least do this. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to treat my hive for varroa mites. And again, I have videos on how to use both those products. I'll include those links as well. And then when I do feed this hive, I'm going to do a couple different things. I am going to, during the summer, I'm going to use the Apis Biologics mixed in with the syrup. Now this tiny little package can make like 50 gallons of sugar water. And it's just a supplement. And this is super simple stuff, but what it does, and I'm a believer in this stuff. I have other videos on it. It's not a snake oil thing at all. This is a very smart beekeeper and scientist that developed this. And he spent a decade perfecting it. A lot of commercial beekeepers use it, especially in Canada. So it's a very fascinating product. And what it essentially does is it mimics the nutrients in natural pollen and natural nectar. And so when you add this to your sugar water, it's creating a blend that is much closer to real nectar, which is so much better for bees than just syrup. So adding this as you trickle feed your bees over the summer is such a good idea. The other thing I really love is Complete, and I'll get a little closer on this. I love this product as well. And Complete, it does something similar to the Apis Biologics. You can use this too over the summer. You can mix it in with syrup, you can mix it with pollen patties. I really like this, especially going into the fall, and it just cleans up your bee's gut going into winter. You can also drench this, so you can mix it with sugar water and drench your bees with it. But again, there's really great instructions on this little bottle if you buy it. So definitely, as you're feeding over the summer, use one of these two products. This one is my slight favorite in the heat of the summer, and then this one is my favorite going into the fall. The last thing I would recommend is if you're trying to really grow your bees, so if your hive is weak and you feel like you need to grow it, the Complete can help stimulate brood production and help grow your bees. And then I'll talk about it elsewhere, but we also are selling global pollen patties, which is the best pollen patty on the market in my opinion, mixed with, we sell one mixed with Apis Biologics, and we sell one mixed with Complete Bee. So you can also just buy a pollen patty mixed with this stuff and give it straight to your hive, which again is really great for your bees over the summer. Some years it's more beneficial than others. If you're in an area that's kind of in a drought and you aren't seeing many flowers blooming, then giving them that pollen patty, which gives them protein, mixed with one of these two supplements, is just going to keep the hive strong throughout the summer. So first thing you do on a hive is assess, test for varroa mites, apply your varroa mite treatment, trickle feed, and then you're going to maintain that trickle feed of, my preference is about a 1/3 or so gallon of syrup every 7 to 10 days, a 1/2 pound to 1 pound of pollen patty, every 7 to 10 days, and you'll carry that up into the early fall. And then the rules change a little bit in early fall, so check back in with us then, and we'll talk about what to do with your bees through the early fall. But this is what you need to do to get your bees through July, through August, through September during those crazy hot days.